host here at SiriusXM Patriot Channel. I'm so glad to have you with us and to welcome in back to the program, actually, Carl Szabo, Vice President and General Counsel for NetChoice. He's a professor of Internet Law at George Mason University Scalia Law School, at Carl Szabo on Twitter. Thank you so much for coming back on, sir.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Oh, my goodness. You could not be here at a better time because New York Governor Kathy Hochul is back at the whole, end of the world. It's hard for me to describe what kind of censorship she's cracking down on here. She says they have a state social media analysis unit, and they're going to ramp up their surveillance of speech. Has she ever read the Constitution, do you think?
You know, based on a number of the laws that she signed into existence and the losses she's facing at the U.S. Supreme Court, I don't think she has. But, this gets to a bigger issue, not just with the city and state of New York, where, Kathy Hochul is essentially trying to say, the problem with all the crime, the murder, the car theft, the drugs, isn't so much that we aren't doing any policing or enforcing of laws. It's a messaging problem. It's social media's fault. So she's creating this, as you mentioned, the social media analysis unit that essentially will monitor and remove hate speech and then simultaneously reach out to people who are engaged in violent or hateful conduct online. So the government will not only remove your speech, but if you're saying the wrong thing, they're going to show up at your door. That's her solution to crime in New York.
So, crime in New York somehow connected to social media, as opposed to the fact that they have a catch and release system where the police do all the heavy lifting of arresting people and then they're let back out even if they've violently offended. No word on doing anything about that.
No, of course not. Of course not. And this is part of the broader narrative, I think, going into the election cycle of 2024. Democrats know that they are losing on every single issue. And for some reason, whether it is Kathy Hochul in New York or Joe Biden in the White House, they think it's a messaging problem. We're just not explaining it well enough. And so we're trying to see them, and what we're seeing right now is them trying to run the same playbook they did in the last election cycle. They are trying to seize control of the means of communication and make sure that only the good information gets out, and we will censor all the bad information. We've learned from the Twitter files, we've learned from the Facebook files, how the Biden administration has leaned on social media to remove content it doesn't like. We watched as 51 national security experts, and I use that in sarcastic quotes, told us all that the Hunter Biden laptop was fake. And so this is all part of a way of taking control of social media and running the First Amendment and putting Democrats in a position to control the narrative going into the 2024 election.
Okay, so thank you, because there's no way they actually care about crime. There's no, and they only seem concerned when, like in D.C., the member of Congress was attacked in her own building in the elevator, or when the other member was with their parent and got carjacked, or when Hunter, I don't know if I guess that's Hunter Biden's sister, or maybe it's his niece. It was a member of the Biden family, Ashley, I think it was, who the Secret Service protection that she has, their vehicle was broken, or they were attempting to break in and they opened fire. Either way, it was someone whose last name is Biden who has Secret Service protection, who was experiencing some of the rampant crime that we've been complaining about. But oh wait, I'm sorry, Carl. What am I saying? That's just a figment of my imagination because I'm a right winger and that's all I care about. That's my thing, is talking about stuff that doesn't exist and making it up as I go along.
Yeah, and you're not alone. A number of city X accounts, I guess we're calling them now, X accounts, websites, they actually go out and they tell people when crime is happening in their neighborhood. People are reporting what we don't read about in the newspaper anymore, the violence. San Francisco actually had an app that identified where there wasn't poop on the streets. And the problem for these government officials is now Americans, consumers, constituents are becoming more informed as to what's going on in their neighborhoods because of social media. And the problem is not that these crimes are happening. The problem is that people are learning about it. And that's what this is about. Now, fortunately, as you point out, the Constitution is pretty darn firm on this. My company, NetChoice, we have two cases before the U.S. Supreme Court right now that are centered on making sure the government cannot control the avenues of speech on social media. And we've won at the local levels because it's a violation of the First Amendment. There's also good news that came out of the House of Representatives. We had Jim Jordan and Comer pass legislation called the Protecting Free Speech from Government Interference Act. And this is something that we're also pushing at the state level. And it makes it clear that government employees can't use their positions for political purposes to control speech online. The unfortunate part of this is that when that bill passed out of the House, it was a straight party line vote. Democrats opposed it completely. And unfortunately, it's just sitting in the Senate because Senate's Democrat controlled, and they are not going to take up a bill that makes it harder for the Biden administration to control speech online. So what we need to do is push Congress to enact it. Simultaneously, we can start pushing our local lawmakers to enact it as well. And at the last piece of good news is that we're seeing state attorneys generals out of states like Missouri and Louisiana bring suits against the Biden administration's attempt to control social media, and they have cases that are on their way to the Supreme Court right now as well.
Whew, all right, because as much smack as people talk about lawyers, even I'll just go ahead and admit I have on occasion talked a bit of smack about lawyers. The fact is, in cases like this, we need lawyers to come riding in with the cases and to file them because our rights are being trampled on, and it takes a lawyer to fight back against that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, I'm an attorney. I'm a former government employee. And when I was a government employee, we were taught something very crucial. Public service is a public trust. We don't work for a political party. We work for the American people. And I think, unfortunately, too many in government have forgotten that. They have let their political perspectives, their political opinions take precedent over the good of the nation. And that's why I get up every day and fight for the First Amendment, fight for the right to allow websites and businesses to say what they want to say and block content they want to block. And the last interesting wrinkle that we just learned about is that this isn't just Governor Hochul's efforts. This isn't just the Biden administration. We're actually learning that the Department of Homeland Security is trying to do an end run around the First Amendment. Now, remember, the First Amendment says the government may not control speech. Government may not control speech. So what we're learning about is the Department of Homeland Security, famous for their attempted Disinformation Governance Board, actually has been using the grants to universities to then get the universities to do the content moderation, the censorship for the Department of Homeland Security. Kind of the idea is, well, it's not the government that's banning speech. It's, in this case, Stanford University that's banning speech, and therefore it's constitutional. Fortunately, that's a complete misreading of the First Amendment, but that, don't let the Constitution get in the way of government censorship seems to be part and parcel for a lot of what we're seeing today.
Well, what I really want is for people to have a clear understanding of this, because what they'll say is, well, it's Team Democrat, so we support this because Kathy Hochul, blah, 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 blah. And I say blah, 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 because I can think of some reasons, but none of them are relevant to protecting our rights. What people don't remember is that the pendulum always swings back in the other direction. When the Nazis were in full-blown control, waging war all over the place and, feeling invincible, of course they thought they would never be brought to heel. Of course they thought what they were doing, they felt justified in doing it. But when the Nuremberg trials hit and when they were being literally brought to justice, they saw, at least I believe they saw the error of their ways, whether they admit it or not. And it could be seen that what they were doing wasn't just wrong and immoral, but it was a trampling of the rights of other human beings. They were eliminating people based on their ethnicity. And so, this is not to that level, but this is where tyranny begins. It begins with one governor deciding that she needs to police speech in complete effrontery of the Constitution and the First Amendment. And then it just goes beyond that because other governors will feel empowered to do something similar.
And remember, the part of the justification for the seizure of control by the Nazi Party in Germany was the burning of the Reichstag. And they said it's in the interest of national security that we seize control, that we seize power. And look, we don't even have to look that hard to our history. Let's just go back to COVID, right? National security, national emergency, let's seize control of whether people can go to church. Let's tell people they can't go visit their grandparents in elderly homes. People can't open their places of business. National security has always been the excuse for government seizure of power. And that's why we must stand firm with the First Amendment. That's why we are fortunate enough to live in a nation rooted in freedoms like the First Amendment. And you're exactly right with respect to the pendulum. Let's remember, these are the same groups of individuals who would have flipped the table and cried authoritarianism from the rooftops had it been Donald Trump engaging in these types of actions. So you're exactly right. I think Democrats will rue the day that they did not take advantage of enacting these types of protections against government control of the internet.
Yep, because if it's the conservatives saying, you can't post things about transgenders, you can't, my favorite analogy for this when I hear them talking about banning books is, well, what if in schools in Republican states, they made it mandatory, just like they're making it mandatory for DEI and making it mandatory for LGBTQ, friendly curriculum. What if we made the Bible the mandatory thing and people were there teaching your children how to be disciples of Jesus Christ and teaching them how to receive the Holy Spirit and teaching them how to take communion? I mean, liberals would burn schools to the ground before they allowed that to happen. But we're supposed to submit to their edicts.
They definitely won the narrative on that, too, because nobody's banning books. But
right.
Remember, in part because of the internet, I can go on the internet today, basically get any book from anywhere in the world and have it delivered to my door within a couple of days. Banning books is something that we used to have back in the 50s, but because of the internet, because of the opportunity, because of the access, banning books is something of the past. And just because people have different opinions on what's appropriate for a school is not a banning of a book. It's just saying not in the school. But once again, this is all about making sure we've access to the avenues of speech so that we can get our message out and correct the record.
Yeah, and the correcting of the record, and then obviously stopping Kathy Hochul. So does this go to the Supreme Court? How does after you file a lawsuit against this, what then happens?
Yeah, great question. So essentially, once this is put into effect, a group like NetChoice or like many of the other free speech advocates, like FIRE is a good example of that. They're fighting censorship on campuses right now. They file a suit for an injunction. Which basically means the law cannot take effect. That's what we successfully achieved in a number of our cases. And then the state can either recognize what they're doing is wrong, which in New York, they usually choose not to. A good example of that would be with the Second Amendment, where they will enact blatantly unconstitutional laws, fight it all the way to the Supreme Court, realize they're about to lose, and then change the law in the hopes that they can avoid a bad decision. But in the same vein, we would bring a suit to enjoin the law, stop it from taking effect, and then they would fight it and it would go up. And presumably this wouldn't even reach the Supreme Court because this is such a blatant violation of the First Amendment that no court would even consider finding for the state of New York. And once again, the justification of this is it's a national emergency. The argument is, well, we're just making recommendations. But at the end of the day, if I know the government is watching everything that I say or do online, and if I say or do something online that they don't like, that they're going to send somebody to my door and ask me to have a conversation about it, that's going to chill free speech. And I can tell you, over 200 years, no Supreme Court has said that's okay. And fortunately for Americans, that's where it will land. Unfortunately for Kathy Hochul, she's got a new strategy. And I just wish instead of trampling on the First Amendment or censoring free speech, she would instead lean on doing her job, which is to clean up the streets and stop the crime.
So it's not just you. I find it heartbreaking that families are being victimized and her focus is on the internet. And I think that is so so
It's an easy scapegoat, right? It's
yeah.
hard work to clean up the streets. It's hard work to take what is for Democrats surprisingly a hard stance of theft is theft, crime is crime, murder is murder. But it's time that we take those time Democrats take those stances that is bad. And instead of doing the hard work, it's easier to grandstand and scapegoat tech. I mean, scapegoating. Look, I'm a Jewish American. Scapegoating's been around for quite a long time, and it's always easier to blame the other than to take responsibility for your own misdeeds. And that's exactly what we're seeing right here with tech. And I just hope no conservative falls for the trick that's being played, which is to say, if we just hand over a little bit of control to the government when it comes to social media, when it comes to the internet, everything will be okay. Because it doesn't matter if it's a Democrat, Republican, or something in the middle in power, it's going to be bad at some point for Republicans, it's going to be bad for conservatives, it's going to be bad for free speech, and it's going to be bad for America. And that's why we must hold true to our core values, our American values of freedom, free expression, and that's why NetChoice every single day fights for free expression and free enterprise on the internet.
I love it. So tell us a little bit more about NetChoice because I mentioned it in the introduction when you were first joining, but I want people to actually know and understand what it is. How did NetChoice come about, and what is your work there?
I've been there for 13 years. I mean, for me, this is a mission that matches with what I truly believe in. I truly believe in America being the greatest nation on the planet. I truly believe that is centered on what I describe as permissionless innovation, or quite simply freedoms. The freedom to experiment, the freedom to innovate, the freedom to try, the freedom to develop. And that's what is at the heart of what NetChoice is. We are out there tearing down government red tape, making it easier for people to create, to develop, to innovate, and giving people the freedom to do what they want on the internet. And that's what we do every single day. We've been around for 20 plus years. And as I said, we will take stances against a Republican if you are trying to do something violative of the First Amendment, violative of conservative principles of limited governments and free markets. We'll take stances against Democrats who do the same thing, because at the end of the day, we want everyone to have an opportunity. We want America to continue to be that shining beacon on the hill. And we know that right now is one of the most dangerous points in the history of our nation. What made America the greatest nation on the planet is the fact that people were free. We are one of the few nations on the planet that has freedom built into our Constitution. We're one of the only nations on the planet that has free speech built into our Constitution. And if we give that up, we will cease being that amazing secret sauce that makes America the greatest nation on the planet. So NetChoice, look, we got a mission statement, free expression, free enterprise on the internet, but at its heart, that's what every single one of us at NetChoice believes. That's what every single one of us at NetChoice is fighting for every single day.
Oh, I'm so grateful for that. So as we close out here, are there any other cases besides Kathy Hochul and her nonsense, any other cases that we should be on the lookout for, or anything else we need to know, Carl?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that's kind of gone under the radar, President Biden just the other week issued what's called the Executive Order on Artificial Intelligence. Basically, I would not say to anybody go read it unless you have narcolepsy. It's about 100 pages long, but what's buried in there actually is the opportunity and power for the Biden administration and the Biden government to actually seize control of the avenues of communication. It is written incredibly broadly. It then asks all, dozens of government agencies to start creating rules. That's a short, fancy word for laws or regulations that it can use on businesses, that it can use to coerce and compel social media to remove and restrict content it doesn't like. And almost like a sad joke, the basis of this executive order, and I wish I were making this up, is because President Biden saw the new Mission Impossible movie where artificial intelligence is the bad guy. And therefore, he rushed and wrote this bill or this executive order. I loathe to think what he's going to do when he sees the movie Godzilla. But one of the reasons why they did this is because many Democrats still believe fundamentally that Hillary Clinton lost the election in 2016 because of social media, and they want to make darn sure that they have seized control of the avenues of communication and that artificial intelligence doesn't do to Joe Biden what social media did to Hillary Clinton. So that's one of the things that we all need to be on the lookout for. Anytime you see government trying to create a new rule, new regulation, even if it sounds like a good idea, we just need to stop and think, what are the unintended consequences? How can this be used in nefarious ways, and how can this be used in ways
to hurt us,
harm conservatives?
Yeah. Carl Szabo from NatChoice, thank you so much for being with us. And that's the show, and that's the week. Back with you on Monday. God bless you.